the payroll process here. So on the bottom, one of the things that we want to first confirm is our versioning. So to confirm our versioning, you can launch Dynamics GP, and then if you go over to, just got to minimize this for a second here, under the Help, About Microsoft Dynamics GP, and we can look and confirm our versioning that we have here. Now, I have installed the so that's mine is reflecting 1. But you'll notice on page 20, in order to run the payroll update, we got to be on 2010 or we got to be on 2013. And then with the latest service packs installed, right below that before number 2, we have the versioning there. So if you're running 2010, once you get the year-end update installed, it'll be listed as 0.2351. And with 2013, it'll be listed as 1801, which is what you're seeing in that environment. Okay, so moving on page 20, we want to look at completing all the 2014 pay runs. The key component there is complete the 2014 pay runs. Do not install the 2015 tax updates until you've completed 2014 pay runs. Okay, does that make sense? And we'll get into more of that as we go through this. Number 3, we want to go in and you can go in and complete your monthly and quarterly reporting or period end procedures. So that's listed under HR and payroll. Then under the reports, there is the period end. So I'm at the bottom of page 20. Okay. And the period end procedure here, you have the selection. Liabilities. We talk about period end, and then we're also going to talk about quarter end. The one key component with posting liabilities is to make sure that you don't post period end liabilities and quarter end. Do one or the other. Okay? The system is not going to prevent you talk more in detail about that. Okay. Moving over to page 21. On the quarter end, this again is where you actually have the ability to process your quarter end procedures. From here as well. So if I chose October, November, and December, if that was my quarter end, then you can choose your 941 preparation report. Okay. On page 22, one of the key things that we always talk about is making backups. One of the things that you want to make aware of with your IT staff or team that you have is when we do payroll closing, and closing in general, you'll notice in the documentation we talk frequently about make a backup, make a backup, make a backup. Now, we can be overly aggressive about that, backups with each year-end close. That's up to you if you want to do one every single. Key thing is that you make backup and then run payroll and something happens, you can go back to that backup from a restore perspective, or take that test and make a backup and then payroll or GL find out the situation that needs correct. If that's the case, then when you restore, you gotta do everything. Okay? So just something to think about. If you've got a good IT staff and they're willing to make backups, so just consider that piece of it. In the middle of page 22, number 6 is installing the 2014 payroll year-end update. And as I talked about earlier, we can look in those first 2 pages that I talked about. I did run the year-end update in the lesson company here, and it took about a half an hour, 5 minutes. What it does, to be installed on each client. Probably GE, or I should say Microsoft, has started to do like it used to be. It was just little components for payroll. Okay. All right. And as I mentioned, you can get that downloaded. Took 5 minutes just on my PC. You got to think about having a little bit of downtime. That year-end update install. The year-end update installation component is critical before you process your year-end wage file. Get into that in a second. Okay. So just keep in mind year-end update. And we'll do the closing processes for payroll. Then we'll do the 2015 tax updates in that order. Right? So on the bottom of 22, number 7, creating the year-end wage file. Most of our work is going to be done right here. In the routine. Closed. So you'll go ahead and once you've completed all your 2014 pay runs, go in and select year-end closing. Now I'm working with lesson data, so it does show 20 process, and it'll go through and create that year-end wage file. Once that is complete, moving over to page 23, you'll notice again we have listed on there, make a post year-end backup. Again, let you decide on how you want to handle that as far as having the ability to restore at a point in time. Okay. So getting into the year-end wage report, so when it creates that year-end wage file, we have the ability to then go into the year-end wage report, and you'll see the actual year will display. I ran through the process for 2017. And you can choose your employee type, whether they're regular or Medicare qualified. This will provide you a sorting order for the report. And then you could do all employees, or if you wanted to do a range. I'll go ahead and do all. And I'll select print and go to the screen. And so here is the year-end employee wage report. And what you'll do is you'll go through here and confirm any of the special items or other items boxes relating to 401k, you'll notice in this environment, the employee's ID number. This is what will get used to produce the W-2s, okay? You can go through that, print that out, and review that and make sure you have that in sync to what you need. On the bottom of 23, step number 9, then what we'll do is go through, and if there are some changes that need to be made, we can go in and select a given employee. This is drawing from the 2014 specific to that employee. If we had 401k situations here, by clicking Other, I could go in there and validate that information. Now, the edits that happen here don't necessarily go back and reflect transactional history that's occurred. So what you're doing is confirming off of your year-end wage file. Okay. All right. So on page 24, shows you the edit W-2 information. Instructions there. It should be essentially the same. Okay. On 25, page 25, the next step then would be to print the W-2s. Okay. And again, we're operating in this middle section under routines, and we select the print W-2 forms. So in this case, we'll just go ahead and I'll print the validation report so you can take a look at that. And I've got a bunch of invalid Social Security numbers. Apply that for you on the report, and then they can be corrected. Okay? W-2 form alignment. Through and printed that. I could then test my printer, make sure my forms align. And at that point, you'd print the W-2s. Produce those. Okay. And then you have the W-3 transmittal form. Moving over to page 26, if we have 1099-Rs that need to be produced, I guess I should ask, is there any questions up to this point? Green shaped piece would be the electronic filing, right? Yeah, when we do the actual electronic filing. Number 10 on page 26. Edit 1099-R. Okay. Just briefly walk through it here then. If you had 1099-Rs, you have the ability to edit those. I don't have any in here as well. Then you'd print the 1099-R, so you can just skip page 26 if you don't have any 1099-Rs. On page 27, step number 11, that would just be producing, actually printing those. Then we'll move over to page 28, creating that W-2 electronic file. So on page 28, step number 12, on the W-2 electronic filing component, what you would do in here is the actual file name that they're going to want. And then if there's any submitter information that you need to validate, which is your organizational information, pretty straightforward information. I guess the main key things are, did the year-end wage file run correctly? Are all my numbers confirmed and valid on what's there? If they aren't, have they been edited using the Edit W-2 window? There. On page 29, it talks about the electronic file submitter information. And one of the requirements is there's more than 250 employees filed electronically. That's listed on 2829. Over on page 30, step number 13, one of the things that we've always recommended with reports is in the upper right-hand corner, you click on employee lists. We've always recommended to print out a detailed employee list and then submit that sheet with their W-2 to the individual. And because then they can revalidate information. You know, if there's anything that they're planning on considering changing, maybe they're moving in the next couple months or something of that effect, they have the ability to validate the information around the records that you have. So in here, I just created a report option called year end. And I'm going to click print this to the screen. And what it does is it allows you to go in and benefits are as well. Some cases, employees like to change their 401k each year, whether it's an increase or a decrease. So just it's kind of a year-end cleanup, if you will. It's kind of what I'm mentioning. We're trying to get across is to think about that. There's some validation on that. Like I mentioned, it does show pay codes. It shows deduction codes. It shows benefit records, etc. Kind of a year-end cleanup type item. Anybody in here running HR right now? Sure. On page 31, once we've gone through the process of doing the year-end closing, some of the things that we try to look at again at a yearly basis is what type of information do we want to archive from the given year. So on page 31, step number 14 there, you can go in, you'll notice the window direction is listed under there, whether it's version 2010 or 2013 as we go through it. This is under the utilities component. If you are running HR, there's an archive employee window, and what you can do is go in and identify what other companies would not necessarily archive, but it is optional. Okay. On page 32, step number 15, there's also, this one's more specific to non-HR, but running payroll is under HR and payroll. If you go to the utilities, under the payroll section, there is the remove inactive records. And that's the third one down here called remove inactive records. And here you have the ability to remove anything that's inactive. And we have it listed there. If you're using HR, removing inactive records in payroll will also remove the inactive records in the human resource side. If you're using direct deposit, there's a notification there that will also remove records of employees that are marked as inactive from the employee direct deposit window. And then if you do remove inactive employee records only, meaning the top checkbox, and that would be history for the payroll. Payroll reports would be retained. If you do remove the inactive employee history information, then the reprint journals. Everybody aware of reprint journals? I'll print that report at the time. That historical posting. So again, these are optional. There's things as you go through with Lisa and Dan on the other modules. There's things that we refer to as optional. There's things that we essentially recommend or try to require wholeheartedly. But it's up to you on some of those decisions. After that's done, then step 16, and this will be reiterated in some of the other sessions this morning as well, is setting up the fiscal periods. And this is under the administration tab, and then the setup and company, and find it here. What you want to make sure when you do the fiscal and Dan and Lisa, you probably talked about it a little bit in your material. You only do it once. We just have it highlighted in payroll here as well, but it's not that you have to do it 3-4 times. Once you do it one time, it's done. Keep that in mind. Okay. You just enter in the year, and then you enter the first day, last day, the number of periods, and then you process calculate, and it'll go through and calculate those specific. One of the things that as we talk about fiscal periods, once you've gone in and done your year-end closing process, typically you'd come in here. Most of mine for 2017, in your case it'd be 2014, all of these would be closed. And what that does is it just prevents postings from happening into the incorrect year. Okay? So month, and then you'd move on to the next month, and transactions would not mistakenly be put into a prior month because you already closed them on the books. Same thing with the year-end process. We want you to actually close that year. And Lisa will be going through the GL close, which will actually turn the fiscal periods into a historical year. So what we talked about on top of page 33 as closing the payroll series and marking that as closed. On 18, step number 18, You have situations with, if you are running HR, what does happen at times is you've got some accruals. You'll have to go in and set up the new attendance. And this is under set up human resources. And the attendance and the setup. Right now, I'm just running the payroll components. Have the HR selection marked. In this case, I'm actually handling my accrual for sick and payroll, or sick and vacation within the payroll module. If you are running HR, you'd have to come in here and just confirm, and reset your settings. If there are situations where you have, like on the bottom of page 33, an employee that has additional vacation hours and you are running human resources and you want to get that balance down to 0, you have to do a human resource transaction entry process to actually reduce it. Same thing in payroll. If you have a scenario where you want to clear out the additional hours that are in there for payroll as far as some PTO that didn't get used and those things, you have to do a transaction to handle that within the payroll transaction entry or the manual check side. Okay? In most cases, everything is good from that perspective, that there typically isn't any adjustments in there. On page 35, again, this is HR related. From an accrual standpoint, you want to make sure that in the HR attendance and accrual period area, which is down here under setup, and then human resources, attendance, and accrual periods, that you've defined based on your pay periods, the biweekly setup. In this case, I'll just go to resources for your accrual. Okay? So there's not really a year-end process for HR, except for these few things if you are running HR. So definitely next year, running payroll now and wanting to handle the Affordable Care Act, human resources will definitely be something that you'll be implementing soon. So you can track those components in there. And these elements will be more. Okay. At that point, on page 35, then we've gone through the installation of the year-end update. We've gone through the processing of our year-end wage file. We've edited our W-2s. We've printed our W-2s. We've processed our electronic file. At that point, then we're ready to install that tax update. As I mentioned, December 19th is when they're talking about the update coming out. That's the targeted. That'll be round 1. And that's on page 35, installing the payroll tax update. Once we get the location of the location for the download on the tax update, we can get that out to you. The other option is for the tax update. Always forget what this is at. It's under the Dynamics GP and then maintenance. And then you can check for updates. And then you get a choice to do it automatically. Either on the network or locally. Next, That only has to be installed. Has to be installed once. And if I select automatic, it'll ask you for an authorization number, which is your recorded number that you have with Microsoft. And if you need that, we can get that as well. And it will run through the process. Then your updates are in place. So the biggest thing there is just the order. Does everybody understand the order to go through? You'll want to be getting the year-end tax update in place. Or excuse me, you want to get the year-end update in place before you produce the year-end wage file. There are some updates that are in there that pertain. I don't think there's any W-2 changes, but there is like I mentioned as well, as with that update, it'll get you up to some of the latest. Okay. Now, there is on page 35, there's an alternate checklist. That's a loaded question. In 2013 versioning, and also the requirement to keep in mind for moving forward with affordable care components, you need to get to 2013 and then also install and deploy human resources. that piece is out there. And you would also I can get a copy. So those are the key components. I think we answered your question, Patrick. Um, any questions? I mean, I think most of you have been through payroll year end, and that's probably your first one. Definitely, if you have questions, just want to confirm something. I know we've had attendees that attended 5, 6, 7 years ago, and they still use their old process sheets. So yeah, use them to jot into. They don't change much. I guess that's what we're trying to get across. What steps, what process. I know everybody. Any questions at this point? Oh, the alternative checklist piece. A difference here. Let's step through these then. It's going to be very similar to what we talked about with the 2014 or the prior alternate checklist. So if we go through this on page 35, 36, we're confirming versions on page 36. We're completing our 2014 pay runs. We're not installing our 2015 yet. Completing our monthly and quarterly payroll period end process, our quarter end process on page 37. So these are all the same as far as what we're doing. On page 38, we're installing the 2014 payroll year end and filing update, which we talked about. Moving over to page 39, we're creating the wage file just like we normally would do. We're making our post year end backup. Nobody specifically had any 1099s, but on page 40, we're verifying our W-2s and our 1099-Rs. We're printing our detailed employee list for archiving, very similar to what we were doing, the fiscal periods and those components. Then when we get over to page 45, we're at the point where we're installing the 2015 tax update. Then we process 2015 payroll. Then we get into editing the W-2s at this point, okay, if needed. Then we do the W-2 validation report, statements, and W-3 transmittal. Page 48, this is the edit 1099Rs. If you had those, you do that. And the electronic filing. So just a little bit when that tax update gets installed. So we're installing that tax update, do the run, and editing of the W-2. Okay. And I got a good consolidated list that I'll make copies of as well. There's a lot of detail in these sheets, but if you want just a concise list here, I'll give that to you as well. So that's really the difference in the alternate, is just the making sure that we install that payroll tax update for 2015, then we process that 2015 pay run, and print the W-2 statements, and then print the 1099R forms. So I'll make a copy of this for you as well. Any questions? Convert over to the GP 2013. Liaison Messenger. We have a few clients that use it. Not the one that I'm thinking of is not specifically with direct deposit. But are there specific questions that you have related to it? Or? Yeah, maybe connect up with Dan on that. There are a few questions or tips and tricks as well on page 52. You can go through those and see if there's any situation that might impact what you may have specifically in need of. As I mentioned, we'll get you the link for the 2015 tax updates if you decide to do it manually. Most clients will do it automatic. So just tax updates, get them downloaded. What page are you on? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and those should be taking care of the unemployment tax rates and those things. Thanks, Patrick, for the clarification. On page 54 as well, just to reiterate, that's uh, the same as what we talked about on page 2. It's just the link to that year-end update. There is one different for 2010 and 2013, and the versionings are listed there as well. So not too complicated. I think typically the biggest challenge is the anxiety, right? Um, and regardless if you've done it a few times, it's always you want to make sure payroll's right. So, but if you do have questions, let us know. Call in. Just try to give us a heads up when you're going to be doing it, and make sure that yeah, just give us a heads up. We have an idea. Yeah, and we do have some clients request us to come out and just be there for moral support. And so we've done that, but for the most part, everything's gone fine. And that's a good point. Just to reiterate, Lisa, when you do that backup, you're physically doing a company database backup. So it's not that you're going in and saying, oh, I only want payroll out of this company. I'm going to back up that whole company database. So if you did get into a restore situation, you got to talk and communicate and make sure that, okay, we took this at 10 o'clock. Now, John Doe, what did you do between 10 and 9? That, those changes will be reflected there when you restore. So it's a communication type thing as well. Patrick's question is, there is a backup piece within GP that you can do, which will make that company backup. The other thing to keep in mind as well is, as part of year end, one of the things is, don't be afraid to ask your IT department and say, can we double check how we're backing up Dynamics GP in general? Okay. Yeah, and you should find that you've got a nightly backup and you've got transaction log backups. And those transaction log backups can take you and allow you to restore to a point in time. Is that what you're... Okay. Yeah, so there's a lot of different backup strategies, but you can never have enough backups, right? And when you do the backups, you never use them. But always be in that environment too when you have, when's the last time, and you may not know, but maybe you do, is when was the last time when you actually did a test restore? Ever? 2 years ago, right? That's something, year end is when you start thinking about these types of things. Talk with IT. Hey, maybe in the first quarter, can we do a test restore? Let's just do a simulation. Doesn't hurt, because when you do get into a situation where you do need it, you're under a lot of pressure. and there's that anxiety piece because the company's down, and those types of situations. Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. Any other things? Questions? All right. So we finished about 5 minutes early here. We're going to take a break, and then